Thank you very much. Good morning. This is the Public Safety, Natural Resources and Transportation Joint Subcommittee of the Finance Committee, and we welcome you this morning. Let's see, if the Secretary could please call the roll.
Assemblywoman Miller.
Here.
Assemblywoman Monroe Moreno.
Here.
Assemblywoman Peters.
Here.
Assemblywoman Titus.
Here.
Assemblywoman Tolles.
Here.
Assemblyman Watts.
Here.
Senator Brooks.
Here.
Senator Goycochea.
Here.
Chair Dennis.
Here, thank you very much. All right, just a reminder to stay muted when you're not talking. Also, if you want to ask a question, I've got the screen up, so just wave your hand. I don't have the Teams up, so I won't see that, but you can just wave your hand and we'll see you. And if you are giving public comment, wish to summarize this, you can summarize your remarks and just you can also submit them in writing. So today we have a few budgets before us. We are going to hear budgets from the Colorado River Commission, from NDOT, and from Southern Nevada. Well, actually, let's see. It's more than that. We got the Department of Veterans Services, so we got several of their budgets, and so we are going to begin with the Colorado River Commission, and I think I see Director Witkowski. So when you're ready, go ahead and begin. And I don't know if you're doing a presentation, but we've got questions as we go, as always. So if you go through a budget, I might stop you just so we can cover that one, but depending on how you do your presentation. So good morning, go ahead.
Good morning. I assume you can hear me?
I can hear you great.
Great, thank you. Yes, we do have a short presentation. If I could share that. Which is it, this one?
Yes.
This one?
Yes, click there. And then click share down.
Okay.
There you go.
Okay, I think we're up. All right. Well, thank you, Chair Dennis and Vice Chair and members of the committee for having us today. Today with me also, I have Doug Beatty, our Chief Financial Officer, and we just have a short presentation and then we can answer questions, or if you have questions during the presentation. Just an overview, kind of the 4 areas that we're involved with is the natural resources and environmental programs. This is basically the water issues of the Colorado River. And then we manage Nevada's share of the hydropower allocations of Hoover, Glen Canyon, Parker, and Davis dams. And then we interact with the Bureau of Reclamation and then the Western Area Power Administration regarding markets, investments, rates, those kinds of things. And we have a second group, the Power Delivery Project Group, that provides electric infrastructure for power delivery to Southern Nevada Water Authority, its member agencies, and then Clark County Water Reclamation. And then we also have, by interlocal agreements, Sewer State Energy Association purchases and hedges for energy for the members of the association. And then our funding comes from our administrative fees on water and then revenues from cell power. Our budget process started about a year ago. We meet with our customers in the April-May timeframe prior to the session, the year prior. We draft a budget, it's presented to the customers. We were able to do a virtual one last May, so we were able to get feedback. Then our draft budget goes to the commission usually in June, and it's really just for information purposes and for them to contemplate. And then we bring it back the next meeting, which was last August, for approval. And then in between time, we tweak it based on comments we receive. And then it's submitted to the governor's budget division and it goes through the normal process that we're going through today. Today, we're mostly this budget 4490. It's the budget account, includes all the personnel operating costs for the agency. And we have 4 enhancements. Travel costs, just a reinstatement of travel back to the pre-COVID levels, because we assume as we come out of COVID, we will resume the travel, which under our contracts, we require to meet with WAPA reclamation. And then just assistance for our software. This is just a contract for our billing system that we're working on to improve. And then 1 new position for our power delivery division, and then our just equipment replace for schedules. And that's our presentation. And if you have any questions.
Yeah, we do. Thank you very much. We do have a question. Senator Brooks is going to ask a question.
Thank you, Chair Dennis, and good morning, Mr. Witkowski. Good to see you. My question is about the new position. So you're requesting a new position in this budget, but you've got several long-term vacancies for multi-year. Could you explain the need for the new position in light of the fact that you have so many a handful of vacancies?
Okay. I'm going to go to a next slide. Can you see the next slide there? You share it? Okay. This one.
You shared it.
Yeah, we're talking about the new position we asked for. First, yes, we do have some natural resource specialist positions. Those are a little different positions and different pay scale than what we're looking for. We have had some positions, I think back in 2013, under the reallocation, the agency wasn't sure what the demands were going to be, so they did ask for those natural resource analyst positions. We did advertise for one of those in 2018, and we're not successful. And then when I became the acting director in October, it looked like our revenues and expenses were not matching up, and we did need to increase our administrative fee charge. And so the commission approved that in January of 2019, and those didn't go into effect until May and July. And then in the fall of 2019, rather than hiring, we just reallocated some work. And then, of course, COVID hit and our revenues have gone down. So we just, the times that we did recruit for it, we weren't successful. And then with the reduction in revenues, we wanted to wait and see what the visibility of our revenues are going to be. And since the fall of 2018, it hasn't gotten better with the COVID time met reduced production out there, and there's no more market purchases at this time. So the revenues are down. So we're not expecting probably to fill those positions for a while until their production comes back, or there's other industries that locate there. So it's just been a level of watching our revenues and seeing if we could afford it before we hired. And at this time, we've just been hesitant to hire those old positions, but they're not, again, they don't pay or have the same category as what we're looking for the new position. And on the new position here, the reason I put this chart up is we have our assistant director of engineering and our power facilities manager. Those both have been with us for 25 years. Come 2023, and we started talking about this about 2 years ago, and we thought we'd ask for a new position. And the idea is that the new position on the left, we would hire probably 6 months, depending on what we can find, but about 6 months before January 1, 2023, and they would train under the assistant director. And then once he retires in January of 2023, that person would move up to his position. The power facilities manager on the right, he's going to retire at the same time, 2023. And so we'll move up to senior facilities engineer and then replace senior facilities engineer. So that's the need for the position for our power delivery group. And there's been, of course, the next question as well, will we get rid of the new position once we, come January 2023? And normally it would have filled its reason for having it, and we may, but we're also kind of monitoring the growth. As you know, Senator Masto at the federal level has the lands bill, and there's about 33,000 acres out there that they want to develop under that bill for commercial and residential. And if that happens, we expect the demands for the electrical systems will increase. And so we may want to use that position, but it's a little premature. But I just put that caveat that we may want to look at that. Before we fill any of these positions, though, we consult with SNWA because they do pay for these. And so they look at the budget each year and we consult with them. So, and that's the promise that we made on this position, that, before we filled it on even the new position, we would consult with them. But it was their concern back when I came in that we needed a plan for succession planning. So that's probably a long answer, but and if I can answer more if you'd like.
No, thank you. I appreciate that answer. And I don't have any further questions, and Chair Dennis.
Thank you. And you anticipated my question and answered that already on what are you going to do once you move the person up and then you've got the position. Do we have other questions? Senator Goicoechea.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'm just, Eric, I was just wondering, with the drought scenario we're looking at on the Colorado, do you see a point as we're looking at these revenues, are they going to continue to decline because there wouldn't be the ability if we have to cut back generation?
Thank you, Senator Goicoechea. Yes, it is. Right now, we're forecasting our budget, our revenues on administrative side, on a hydro side, to be about $1.3 million. Before the downturn, they were about $1.5 million. We're not expecting that extra revenue that we get from the market purchases to add to revenue. But with the low case on the river, we're expecting the low case would be $1.2 million. So we'd probably see a drop of 100,000 from the if the current I guess I should back up a little bit. I think you're thinking long term. We're thinking we look at the forecast for the next year, and with the river and the drought, right now our base case is $1.3 million. A good year, if we really had a good April snowfall up there, we might do $1.4 million, and then the low case would be about $1.2 million. And so we're managing our costs within those. But long term, you hit on another topic that, of course, is on everybody's mind, is what's the long-term drought look like? And we do have to renegotiate. I shouldn't say renegotiate, but have a new agreements after 2026. Right now, we have the drought contingency plans that if the drought continues, there's contributions made to the lake levels to help assist hydro. But there does have to be new agreements, and those will be negotiated in the next few years that'll take place after 2026. And the reason I'm saying that is that part of that analysis is there's a lot of modeling that goes on. And they look and see, well, what's the probabilities and what's the lake levels going to look like and what's the contributions and actions that have to take. And all of that, when it's all considered, hydro is also considered too. But you're right, with lower lake levels, you get a little less predictivity out of the hydropower because there's not quite the capacity there. So we are continuing to monitor that. And I would just say we're one of the I think, fortunate state agencies because we work on the water side and the hydropower side. So we know what's going on both, because sometimes the right and the left hand's not talking, but because we're in both those meetings, we have a pretty good idea what's going on.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, I'm not seeing any. If I missed you, just turn your mic on and say you want to speak. All right, thank you very much. I think that's all the questions that we have for you today. Thank you very much for being here. So we will go ahead and go on to the next budget, Department of Transportation, we have Director Swallow here to present.
Good morning. Thank you for having me, Christina Swallow. For the record, I am going to share my screen. We do have a short presentation. I understand that there may be questions along the way. The presentation is primarily focused on our decision units, and so it might be appropriate to really stop and pause and answer the questions at that point if the questions are related. So just interrupt me if needed, and I am going to get started. Just want to ensure that you guys can all see the presentation. All right, I haven't heard any objections, so I'm going to assume that I couldn't see head nodding, but we'll get started.
We can see it on our end. If BPS can't see it on the broadcast, they'll let us know.
Okay, perfect. All right, so just a reminder of NDOT's scope. We are responsible for the planning, construction, operation, and maintenance of approximately 14,000 lane miles of highway, which includes approximately 5,400 centerline miles, of which 86% are rural and 14% are urban, and just over 1,200 bridges. While only 19% of Nevada's roads are on the state maintained system, that 19% carries 50% of all vehicle traffic in the state, 70% of all truck traffic, and almost 70% of all heavy truck traffic. So it's a critical component of moving people from where they are to where they want to go throughout our state. NDOT is also responsible for an integrated transportation system, which includes supporting travel by pedestrians, bike, rail, air, and transit, particularly rural transit. We do not have a role in urban transit. And we manage the majority of federal funding for Nevada's, I just said, rural transit programs, which offer over 5 million rides annually for the disabled, elderly, and others. And I'm proud to announce, I don't know if you saw, but we recently started some new routes in the state to help provide that additional services, particularly along the 95 corridor from Reno to Las Vegas, really helping all of the travelers along that corridor get to where they need to go, and also providing some additional services in Elko County to ensure that those residents can get to the services they need. I wanted to highlight on our budget. COVID-19 has definitely had an impact on the highway fund, although luckily it has proven to be more resilient than some of the other revenues. In fiscal year 20, revenue deposited into the highway fund was 6% lower than in fiscal year 19. I should note that we generally anticipate from year to year that there will be a small increase. So that 6% is a little bit of an underestimate of where we anticipate it to be. DMV currently projects for the Biennium 2022 and 23 will be approximately 8% lower than the fiscal year 19 actual receipts. So again, slightly lower than fiscal year 20 receipts actual. These highway fund user fees projections do include restoration of the GST that was shifted in fiscal year 2021 to support the construction project estimated to provide approximately 1,870 job years over the next biennium. I should note that although the highway fund balance was projected to be below, or is projected to be below the minimum target based on the December DMV projections, the DMV is currently in the process of providing updated projections which indicate an ending balance above the minimum target. We have 8 decision units and one shot item that I wanted to just highlight and go over with you. And again, if you have questions on any of these, I will answer those that I can. I do have a team available also on the Zoom, and we'll defer to them, and it's probably best to answer them as we move forward. So our first decision unit is for replacement equipment. NDOT, our state of Nevada Fleet Services replaces vehicles at 100,000 or 125,000 miles and or 10 years. Our NDOT replacement policy is a little bit older and longer than that, 120,000 or 150,000 miles and 10 years. NDOT's heavy equipment replacement schedule is approximately 15 years and 200,000 miles. Unfortunately, because of the economic downturn in the early 2000s and trying to make sure that we're continuing to get construction projects out and favoring the economic impact of the construction project, we've not been able to keep up with our equipment replacement schedule. As currently, our fleet consists of 2,700, just over 2,700 units, including units received and in the process of being put into service, as well as replaced units that are waiting to go to state purchasing for disposal. Of that 2,717 units, currently 1,335 meet replacement criteria. If these units were to be replaced all at one time, it would cost approximately $176 million. And next year's figure will be even higher. So we included in this, we're requesting to replace 8 passenger vehicles for each fiscal year, 15 one-ton dump trucks, 9 in fiscal year 2022 and 6 in 2023, 11 half-ton pickups in 2022, 14 16-axle dump trucks, 8 in 22, 6 in 23, 12 tandem axle dump trucks, 10 in 22, and 2 in 23, 14 wheel loaders, 7 each fiscal year, 6 sweepers in fiscal year 2023, and we're also planning on replacing 10% of the department's radios as part of our cyclical replacement program, which is separate from the radio upgrade program. These radios are just being replaced due to the regular wear and tear. And I will pause for a minute just in case there's any questions before I go to the next decision unit.
Yeah, so this is a little different order than what we have, but I'm going to ask the question that I was going to ask about the radios. Can you talk about giving us an update on the Nevada shared radio system replacement? I know that.
We certainly can. I do have a different slide for that.
Okay, if you're going to talk about it, then we'll wait till you get to that.
Okay, yeah, I have that's a separate decision unit. The radios in this decision unit are simply replacement equipment due to wear and tear, not related to the upgrade.
Okay, all right. Well, then keep going because your order is a little different. I may have you go through the whole thing and then we'll ask our questions. But
perfect. Then I'll just keep going, Senator, and you tell me when to stop. All right. Ensuring. So our next decision unit is new equipment. E720. So on this one, primarily we're looking for. We have a couple of different things. We're pursuant to our standard budgeting practice. It does include $1.25 million for computer equipment and $1.5 million for non-rental equipment. In addition, we're looking, we have requests for new equipment at our headquarters, operations, including computers, furniture, lab testing equipment, and tools. And then across each of the 3 districts, we are asking for 2 new front-end loaders. And these loaders are fundamental work for our maintenance crews. They will be replacing rentals, reducing or replacing rentals that we've been using to keep up with the workload. The front-end loaders are used for mixing salt and sand, hauling debris, cleaning drainage, and loading materials into trucks, again, such as sand needed for winter operations. They have been necessary. The rentals have been necessary in large part because repair parts for our existing loaders are difficult to find. And we have worked with industry to get their support on purchasing these new units. We do anticipate these units will result in significant savings over the life of the equipment. And just for some context, currently 66 of our 132 loaders qualify for replacement. 44 of ours are 20 years older and have not been rebuilt. All right, I'll move on to the next decision unit. Maintenance of buildings and grounds. So maintenance of our facilities is, of course, critical for doing our work. A lot of times we think about the work that we're doing out on the roadway and building our new projects, but if we don't have appropriate facilities and grounds, we're unable to keep up with that, and we can run into issues with regulatory agencies. So these projects, there's the breakout of projects across the 3 districts as well as at headquarters for 11.3 in fiscal year 2022 and 16.4 million in 2023. Should note that of our 461 building structures, including 57 maintenance stations and 35 rest areas, the maintenance stations are composed of approximately 358 buildings with an average age of 49 years old. And the oldest buildings in our assets are 79 years old in districts 1 and 3. The oldest in District 2 is 70. We do have a request for some new positions. In addition, so the new positions we're requesting 11 critical new positions. 2 of them are records management program officers to address the ever increasing number of records requests that we are receiving. 2 of them are human resources personnel to really help us with our investigations. This is in part due to new laws and regulations that were passed in the 2017 session, adding new requirements and deadlines to the progressive disciplinary process, but also to help ensure that we have equity across the state in terms of our investigations by locating all of those departmental investigations into the HR role instead of being led by supervisors and division heads across the department who don't have that HR training. We're requesting 1 person for overdimensional permit section to ensure that we have somebody available to, at all times, to answer permit requests, as well as ensure that we can process those in a timely manner. We're requesting 2 IT positions, an IT manager, 3 to take on the day-to-day managerial duties of the service desk, and an IT professional officer to ensure we have the resources needed to detect, identify, protect, and respond and recover from any breaches that we may face in the future, as we've seen breaches are increasing across the nation. We're requesting 1 traffic operations informational technical officer to support our ITS and radio network systems to ensure the information and communication systems for road conditions and public safety are maintained and operated to provide the most accurate information to travelers across the state. And then we're requesting 3 traffic center technicians, 1 for each district, to ensure that our road operations centers are manned 24/7 and can provide the critical information they need to travelers across the state. We are requesting creation of new student worker positions by the state, and then filling those for us in NDOT. These positions would be similar to what we can provide for students that have graduated from high school, but these would be for students that are currently in a high school or GED program. We're looking to really use these positions to help create a pipeline into our district positions and fill a critical gap that we have. We find that it's hard to recruit across the state in our maintenance and construction crew areas, and we're hoping that providing an opportunity for high school students to get some exposure to the trades and exposure to our work will help them be more interested and be more prepared for joining our team in the future. We do have a decision unit for the fueling system upgrade. We have a program, we've had a program moving forward for a few years now to upgrade our fueling system. Today, the department has completed 21 fuel site upgrades, and we have 25 remaining. Updating these sites will allow the department to maintain compliance with current EPA standards, and it will also improve system safety, dependability, and performance, as well as have a beneficial environmental impact as underground fuel storage tanks are replaced with above ground tanks, lessening the possibility of fuel leakage and environmental contamination. When I mentioned the improvement in dependability, that is critical. While we use our fuel tanks, our fuel system is actually used throughout the state by emergency responders. It's used in responses to fire. It's used in responses to incidents across the state by NHP and others. And so we want to make sure that the fuel is there when they need it. We have seen increases in construction costs since the original fiscal year 2016 estimate of 16.3 was proposed. The additional budget that we're requesting across the 2 fiscal years, fiscal year 2022 and 2023, of $4.75 million will allow the department to complete all of the fuel sites planned for upgrade. The radio system replacement, this would be a one-shot appropriation and is not a decision unit in that way. It's a one-shot appropriation, and will allow us to continue the replacement which started in fiscal year 19. NDOT is the lead agency on this, and we have put many of the project-related process improvements already in place. The project is moving one district at a time in order to maintain operations as efficiently as possible, and it has started in District 1, Southern Nevada. The project is very complex due to the required technology and site locations being at remote mountaintops with difficult terrain and weather-dependent access. While it is currently moving along more slowly than originally planned, the vendor has been impacted by some resources challenges, including shipping and material delays, as well as the movement of construction and technical staff into and around the state as a result of COVID-19. We are working closely with the vendor on all fronts to make sure the project does continue moving along, and we will utilize all protections in the contract to ensure future milestones are met. At this time, the anticipated project end date of fiscal year 2024 is still projected to be achievable. We do have a decision unit for technology investment. Within this decision unit, there are two pieces. The first piece is $9 million towards modernizing our outdated legacy enterprise systems to keep them functioning and supporting our mobile and field workforce. The remainder of the request, almost $12 million, is for a GIS system of engagement. One of the core ways that NDOT provides, operates, and preserves the system is via location and the data that can be tied to that location. Throughout our transportation system, data is being gathered by team members for specific tasks for a specific location at a specific time. Our existing systems serve important roles, but they often lack the ability to organize data by location and tend to be disconnected and siloed from other systems in the agency. It makes it difficult to share the information across organizational boundaries and limits our ability to access reliable information in a timely manner. So as we're continuing to do this, we're looking at how we can streamline our work processes and improve the quality of data and the context enabled to make better decisions. The focus with this system will be on solving business problems that center around location to help the department stream those workflows and make better data-informed decisions through mapping and analytic software. For instance, the department has many specialized systems, including maintenance activities, crash data, pavement condition, construction, congestion issues, ADA, air quality, traffic counts, site fatalities, and safety issues. And what we're hoping to do, will pull all of that information into one system where if you click on a certain section of the roadway, you will get all of the pertinent information that's associated with that, versus having to go to each and every one of the individual systems that may have that information. Our last decision unit is for reclassification of a couple of positions in our environmental group. Rather than having two division administrator twos for environmental functions, we are planning to keep just one, and that classification is okay. But what we're planning on doing with two vacant positions and are requesting approval, these two positions are currently vacant, is we want to reclassify them to support the overall environmental team under one division administrator. So we're looking to downgrade one administrator to professional engineer, grade 47, to environmental program chief, grade 44. This position will not require a PE, and we're looking to upgrade a position from staff to associate engineer to environmental chief position. So we'll have two chiefs, an environmental programs chief and an environmental chief. Both will be grade 44. And one of them will specialize in water-related environmental activities, including stormwater and wetlands. And the other will specialize in non-water-related activities such as NEPA, cultural resources, air and noise, naturally occurring asbestos, and wildlife. And they'll both report, so they'll manage teams, and both report via one environmental division administrator. And that concludes my presentation.
Okay, so we have several questions. You might want to flip back on some of those as we get to some of those PowerPoint. But let's start with the first one, which is a question about the highway fund balance, capital expenditures, and I'm going to ask Assemblywoman Miller.
Thank you, Chair. And if I may, I have a few questions regarding the highway funds.
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. So yes, going back to kind of the highway fund balance, I wanted to know what impact would there be if with the highway funds being reduced, with the reduced balance, next biennium have on the Department of Transportation's cash flow and the state's bond rating?
Thank you for that question. As I mentioned, we are hopeful that the DMV projections that they are currently working on, Christina Swallow for the record, we're hopeful that the DMV projections they are currently working on will show that we are above the minimum. So I want to just make sure everybody understands that, and we will be working closely with the LCD staff as well as the legislators yourselves to correct and adjust as we get those projected data in. So we're hopeful we won't face a below balance situation. But meeting that and maintaining that balance target is important for us first to make sure that we have sufficient cash on hand to meet our operational needs of the highway fund agencies. It's particularly critical during the summer construction season when contractor payments are at peak levels. And so it could end up resulting, if we dropped below that, in an inability to pay our bills. But that's why we set it at that minimum, and we try to make sure that we're always balancing that need. And again, hopeful that the DMV projections will come in higher. I do also want to mention that in late December of 2020, the federal government did approve a COVID Relief Act to help support DOTs in the revenue shortfall that we're seeing in our state revenue. And that funding will be able to help backstop at some level if we need to. So that is also an option that we have to backstop and fill that void if we need to use it. Currently, we're not anticipating using any of that this year until we obligate all of our federal funds, and then we'll add more. But we always want to make sure at the end of the fiscal year that we fully obligated our existing regular occurring federal funds so that we can qualify for August redistribution and get additional federal funding. We've been very successful in that in the past. In terms of our bond ratings are compiled by professional rating organizations, Standard & Poor's, Moody's, Fitch, and some of the creditworthy factors they look at are adequacy of our motor vehicle fuel taxes to cover the bond payments, constitutional protection of the revenue source, Nevada's overall economy and economic outlook, government framework, budgeting practices, financial management practices, liquidity. So it could have an impact on that, which is why we make sure that we do maintain that minimum balance. And again, we're working with DMV to get the updated projections and are hopeful that we will be able to maintain the minimum balance over the biennium.
Okay, thank you for that. Have you had any issues, though, that have materialized that may alter the department's projected unrestricted highway funds balance so that it wouldn't be the $83.7 million that you anticipate by the end of 2023?
I'm sorry, can you clarify your question? Have we had any problems?
Sure. Have you had any issues or any problems materialize that may alter the department's projected unrestricted highway fund balance?
Christina Swallow for the record, I do not believe we've had any problems that would alter that. I should note that if that were to occur, we do our capital project budgeting on an annual basis. Our Transportation Board of Directors approves our annual work program every August. And if we were projecting a shortfall that would impact our ability to pay our bills, we would adjust our construction program and or perhaps some of our other elements of the program to ensure that we did not run into that.
Thank you for that. You've pretty much mentioned a few times now about the federal funding and the possibility of it coming in August, I believe. Can you just be a little more specific and give us any actual specific updates on that possibility? Maybe where you are in the process, what you're required to do, maybe how comfortable you are with a guarantee on those funds coming?
Yes, so there's actually two pieces that, Christina Swallow for the record, there's actually two pieces that I mentioned in that last response. There's the August redistribution. So on an annual basis for many years, when the federal government allocates funding to the DOTs, they allocate something a little bit less than what the total amount is to each of the states. And as we go through the year and we obligate all of that money, so that's our obligation limit, as we obligate that money, if we get to August and we have fully obligated our allocation, we submit to them the additional projects that are ready to go, should there be additional money from perhaps another state that didn't obligate. So we submit to them additional projects. Every year for the past many, we have been successful in getting additional revenue from the federal government to continue to deliver those projects that were above what we were initially allocated. I think last year was almost $40 million. It was a really big year last year. It's not typically that much. It's typically, I think, around $18 million. So that is something that is a little bit of a gamble. I can't tell you that I'm fully assured that we'll get that, but it is something we strive every year to make sure we spend every single one of our federal dollars by August, even though the fiscal year doesn't end until October, by August, so that we can qualify and get any additional scraps that are available to deliver our program. The other piece that I mentioned was the COVID relief funding that the federal government allocated in December. And that is funding that will be available to us. The approximately $90 million, it needs to be obligated. Again, we have to obligate the federal funding, so it needs to be obligated by end of fiscal year 2024. Of that $90 million, we will get $70 million directly to the state, DOT, to our revenue, and the local agencies, the RTC, Southern Nevada, RTC, Washoe, and I think the Tahoe RTC or Tahoe MPO, each get a little bit. So about $20 million total will be distributed for their use. This funding, this revenue is intended to backstop that loss that we've seen in state revenue. The federal revenue, that's obligated by legislation, and so we're continuing to get that. But we all saw that we got that. It was 6% last year. The current projections are 8%. We're hoping that'll get adjusted. But that's meant to backstop. In terms of how we're going to use that revenue, we want to make sure that we're using that revenue as efficiently and effectively as possible. So we're still looking at what our needs are, and if at the end of August, we fully obligated our funds and we can use that money to help deliver another project, we may put it towards a project. We've had discussions and are looking to see if it would be eligible to use on equipment replacement, and may come back in the future to see if we can help catch up a little bit on that critical equipment. So we're looking at where we can best allocate it. Because it's more flexible than our traditional federal funding, we want to be able to, if it makes sense, use it on those things that state revenue would typically be used for. So we're being very thoughtful in terms of how we're planning on allocating, but it is going to be available via traditional federal processes. We spend it, they reimburse us.
Okay. Something you said leads me to, I have one final question. A couple of points that you made in there about, as you were mentioning, the different the different RTCs, and of course, the budget recommendations and reductions that we've had. So could you just go into a little more detail about what factors the department uses to consider in determining projects that will be used, especially because of the recommendations included in the executive budget? So if you could just go into how that decision-making process, or what factors you actually consider.
Thank you. Christina Swallow for the record. That's a really good question. We, in 2019, in late 2018, we approved it via a statewide process, our One Nevada Plan. Our One Nevada Plan looks at how we prioritize our projects across the state. And it was really a statewide stakeholder engagement process to ensure that everybody understands and came to the table and was like, great, this is what NDOT's doing. This is why NDOT's doing it. And it came up with 6 goals. I don't have them right in front of me right now, but the goals are things that we all agree on. Preserve our current assets. We have to preserve the current assets. Improve and protect safety. We have to do that. Increase, I just got a chat. Safety, preserve infrastructure, optimize mobility, transform economies, foster sustainability, and connect communities. Those are all really good things that we want to do. And when I started in 2019, I said, those are fantastic, but how do we balance and weigh those against each other? How do you decide which of those are most important? So during that fiscal year 20, we worked with a consultant, again, to look at how do those criteria, how do those goals weigh against each each other, what are the criteria? We developed criteria, and we used that criteria when we developed our fiscal year 2021 work program. So that enhanced safety is the number one goal, but we also have to preserve that infrastructure and move people around. And then we figure out how does each of those projects weigh against each other. Once we figure that out, we do apply a cost factor because we want to make sure it could be the best project overall, but if it's extraordinarily expensive, we may not be able to deliver the rest of the program. So we do apply a cost factor, and then after we do all of that, we look at all of the needs. We harmonize them. Is the project ready to go this year? If it's not, and maybe it goes in a subsequent year. We look at, what are our different funding pools from the federal government? There are funds from the federal government that we can't spend in the urban areas. They have to be spent in rural. So we make sure that we apply and use all of that. We look at how the projects will address our performance targets. So we make sure that we achieve our performance targets. And we do look at how we spend the money across the state on a regional basis. So we harmonize all of that and deliver the program to our board in the late summer for their approval of the annual work program. And then I believe it's every other year we update the 4-year program, which is our state transportation improvement program, which is the STIP.
Okay, thank you so much for that. I really appreciate it. And thank you, Chair, for the leniency.
Thank you. Senator Goicoechea, I believe you have a question.
And I'll be really brief. I see the budget does not recommend the sale of any highway revenue bonds. How much bonding capacity do we have? And I realize we don't want to use that for operation, but in case we had to backfill with that, do we have some capability there?
Senator Goicoechea, Christina Swalberg, thank you for the question. I do know we just sold bonds, and I see my assistant director of administration is actually typing me right now, so I'm actually going to refer to her. So instead of me reading what she's sending me, she's actually saying she doesn't have the figures. So we will get you the figures. We will get back to you with that information. We do manage our bonding capacity and try to only bond when we need it to deliver the program. We aren't asking for it this year, but are hopeful that we won't need to.
That's fine. You can get that to me offline. I appreciate it.
Okay, do we have other questions? I'm not seeing anyone. Okay. All right, so we're going to move on. We have some questions concerning the E225 and E226 on the new positions. And I believe Assemblywoman Peters is going to ask that.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I have a couple of questions. My first one is, can you just talk a little bit more about what is causing the increase in the records request you mentioned?
Thank you for the question, Christine Swallow, for the record. Well, I can't know entirely what is causing the increase from the public's perspective on why they're requesting. One of the reasons we think we may be receiving additional public records requests is we have delivered in the last several years some very significant large-scale projects, such as Project Neon in Southern Nevada, the Reno Spaghetti Bowl, I-580, the HOV lanes in Southern Nevada that came with Project Neon. And these have implications broadly across the community versus just the local areas, but they also have, these larger projects have increased land acquisitions, modifications to existing utilities, rights of entry. And so we're getting a lot of questions from property owners, we're getting questions from the media. And so the records requests have gone up. It may be in part due to the larger nature of our project, but it could be for lots of other reasons as well that I can't, that I would only be making assumptions.
That makes sense. Thank you. My next question has to do with the HR investigations unit. And can you just discuss what the workload associated with that unit looks like?
Yes, thank you for the question, Christina Swallow, for the record. Our, as you may know, we have over 1,800 positions across the state. So our team is responsible for all of the management of those team members. And we look at across the state in everything, grievances, work performance, behavior, workplace violence, workplace safety, drug and alcohol testing, reasonable suspicion, crashes and accidents. And because we do not have enough team members in our HR personnel division, and specifically because we do not have an investigative unit, a lot of these efforts are being done by supervisors and division heads who don't have HR training And also because it's distributed like that around the state at the supervisory level, at the division head level, it's taking those personnel away from their other duties that they would be doing if they weren't doing an HR investigation. And it's increasing the opportunity for inequities across the state. What we're hoping for is that this investigative unit will be able to alleviate some of the challenges that we have with the informal investigations that are happening distributed across the state by supervisors and division heads, but will also help with the formal investigations. In the past, so we have hundreds of informal investigations every year. In the past several years, we've had fewer formal investigations. In 2020, it was 26 formal investigations. But as I mentioned, there are hundreds of informal investigations that are being done by supervisors and division heads that do not have the HR training and do not have the ability to get that consistency across the state. So what we are really hoping to do is have people who are trained in HR management, HR techniques, HR, and are consistent in the application of those techniques and rules across the state.
I really appreciate that. I think that it's really important to have a third party look at those grievances and make sure that it's an unbiased review. So I appreciate that. And my last question has to do with the student worker program. And can you describe how the department expects to provide a consistent student worker program across this state?
So it will be, Christina Scarla for the record, it will be very similar to what we already do with our public service interns, our rotational worker program that we have and we're very proud of. And it will be overseen in entirety by someone out of our HR division. They will oversee the overall program like they currently do with our public service interns. But each of those will be, each of the student workers will be employed at the district level and be doing district work, but we'll have an overall oversight management from headquarters.
And you think you have enough access to students across the state who would be interested to fill those positions, in particular in like the rural district?
Christina Scarla for the record, we certainly hope we have enough interested. That's one of our challenges is we have, in our maintenance crews, we have significant vacancies across the state, and we're hoping that by providing an opportunity for high school students to work at NDOT, it will provide them a little bit of income while they're in high school, but it will also provide them with that exposure to our industry and our profession, and hopefully provide them a pathway into the department when they graduate if they're interested. So we're hopeful, and 11 isn't a lot. It's not a lot of student interns, or 15, I think it's 15. But it's a starter. It's a starter. So we're hoping to create the position, and if we're unable to fill them, then I think the burden will be on us to go out to the high schools and figure out, why do we have this gap and where and what do we need to do to further increase the interest.
Thank you.
Other questions on this budget? This part of the budget? I'm not seeing any. Okay, let's go on to the next item, which is I started earlier about the shared radio replacement program. I wanted to talk a little bit about that. So, and you kind of gave us a little bit of an update there on that project. Can you maybe be a little bit more specific, especially on the planned activities in 21-23?
Yes. I actually have with me on Zoom, so not specifically with me, but with me on Zoom, Seth Daniels, our Assistant Chief Traffic Operations Engineer. He's overseeing the project. I know he has a couple of other team members who are engaged, so if it gets super technical, he may defer to them. But Seth, can you answer the question?
Sure. Can everyone hear me? For the record, Seth Daniels, Assistant Chief Traffic Operations Engineer. Yeah, we are scaling up. There was a lot of engineering take place early on in the project, but now we are moving into more site-specific work. That is an area where we've had challenges, like you said, resources, getting subcontractors into these remote areas, as well as equipment and some supply chain issues. for the remote sites. That is something we're stepping up more. We've kind of done we've done all the engineering work in Region 0, which is the core of Las Vegas, as well as our Region 1, which is Southern Nevada in general. We're now moving on to looking at the approved engineering work for Region 2, which is Northwestern Nevada. So that will be our primary focus. And we said there is challenges. This is a challenging industry. With a lot of overlap between like big cellular rollouts and stuff. So subcontractors and getting them to the remote areas are hard. We have put protections in that contract, such as liquidated damages, as well as the ability to pull out some of that site work and contract it ourselves through other means, just to make sure this project is on track. And if you have any more particular specifics, I'd be happy to answer those.
So I know we've been through this, obviously you've had to maintain the system, and I know over the years we've had, issues come up where you've had to upgrade the system and you've replaced radios. And so I guess my there would be, so all of that stuff that especially the more recent stuff where we replaced some of the equipment and radios, how does that tie into this new system?
Yeah, so all of those well, we do have to maintain our existing EDAC system, and we're doing that mostly off of spare parts. We've been smart about that for the EDAC stuff. We've actually have spare parts given to us by most recently was from the state of Texas, who just gave us those spare parts for our EDAC system to keep that. So there's not a lot of money involved in that. All of the new equipment purchases we're doing in that earlier decision unit, such as the radios and stuff, those are all compatible with our new system. So that would just be a simple firmware update as we move, those stuff we've been replacing in the recent years onto our new system.
So with the new system, how are you actually going to bring up the new system while you still got the old system? Are they going to run parallel, or do you have to switch them? How does that part work?
Yes, Seth Daniels for the record. Yes, they will be running in parallel. We will have EDAC system. We'll bring down the channel number slowly, the available channel numbers on our EDAC system as we ramp up our P25 system. But we do want that P25 system, since it's public safety, to be properly integrated and tested before we switch all traffic over to that P25 system. But they will be running in parallel. You are correct.
So you're going to be adding new to the towers and keeping the old stuff there until you discontinue it, and then you'll pull it down or whatever.
Yeah, that is correct, Sen.
So and the other challenge I remember from before, and you already mentioned this, is are you going to be able to get this done in a timely manner? Because sometimes you run into issues just getting up on top of the mountaintops to be able to get that work done. And you mentioned challenges with contractors having a lot of other work. Is that realistic to be able to get it done in the time frame?
Yeah, we may see some delays. We're trying to minimize those delays by the tools we have. It is challenging. These sites at 10,000 feet, a hard snow year can really impact our schedules at those, as well as logistically putting deep foundations in for the towers and stuff and getting equipment up there, where it is a significant effort. And as Christina mentioned, my team on this, they are very experienced, and one of the main training that comes from this type of work is military. The majority of my team is retired military and are used to doing projects such as this. So it is a big effort for NDOT. It is 100% effort on this radio replacement project, and the logistics are hard. And I'm very proud of the team and the progress we've made in getting that, as well as, just the challenges with subcontractors and some of these remote areas.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions on the radio stuff? Okay, I'm not seeing anybody. All right, so then the next item we want to ask about has to do with the IT system enhancement, the E550 and the NDOT 19 budget. So, Director, would I ask you that, and then if you?
Yes, you can. Christine's on the record. I'll defer to our IT chief. Dave Woldridge. So in fact, I just did that. So you can ask Dave and he'll come up.
Okay, perfect. Mr. Woolridge, thank you. I think a lot of this was covered in the presentation, but can you just give us a short explanation of the efficiencies? She mentioned some of these, but the efficiencies that you're going to achieve with these enhancements, and the enhancements have to do with modernization as well as GIS enhancements. So if you could talk a little bit about that.
Yes, sir. For the record, David Woldridge, Chief IT Manager for the Department of Transportation. Over the past few years, we've really tried to focus on, a cloud migration strategy, moving all of our systems out to the cloud, which has helped us immensely, especially during this COVID time, just having this data and systems out in the cloud. And we want to continue those efforts, as well as the efforts to just increase our data and our awareness of all of our assets and the location awareness. And that's what the GIS system of engagement that Christina talked about is going to help us do, to be able to look, holistically at a section of roadway and see what's really going on there. And then, the additional benefits of moving that out to the cloud. Let's our workers work from anywhere. Our old maintenance management system, guys would go out in the field, they'd work all day long, they'd come back, spend a couple hours just updating stuff on the computer. They can do that all out in the field now. And it's given us an enormous amount of efficiencies. And then, COVID hit, having this stuff out there has been just amazing, I think.
Thank you. So that's interesting. How do they, when they're out in the middle of nowhere, how do they get access to the cloud?
Yeah, obviously, cellular can be an issue in some of these very remote agency or remote locations. We do, so a few of the vehicles we've equipped with some equipment. We call them cradle points, which have an exterior or an external antenna. It's similar to the stuff the Highway Patrol uses. It really increases our range for cellular. That's one of the projects we're actively working on right now, doing the requirements gathering phases of, so we can really extend our network and make it mobile. Get these guys, turn our vehicles into wireless hotspots so they can continue to work wherever they are.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Can you just talk a little bit about, with all these enhancements, what are the ongoing costs going to be?
Right now, estimates based on some vendor quotes, we're looking at about $5.2 million a year.
And what would that include?
The cloud hosting fees, the software maintenance. That's the majority of the fees. It's, as you're aware, you're an IT guy too. So, as we move things out into, the cloud, we shift a lot of things from capital expenditures to operating expenditures. It becomes a utility. We're not buying hardware like we used to do in the traditional sense, and we're essentially, it's a consumption-based model, and so the costs are really going to be based on how much we're storing, how much compute we're using, things of that nature. So the estimates right now, I honestly, I think that's a little bit on the high side. We're working on an RFP right now, so we can kind of finalize some of that stuff, get a vendor on board, and obviously, things are going to grow over time. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. As we get more storage and more compute and things out in the cloud, it's going to get more and more expensive. But I think the efficiencies gained are well worth the cost. Yeah.
Okay. Great. Thank you very much.
Dennis, can I just add a bit on that?
Yes, please.
For the record. I started my engineering career in 1994, and when I did that, the only thing that you could do was go out to the field to see what was going on. And if you needed to do the research was far different than it is today. And so while we may be experiencing a shift in costs, and I would say it is a shift in cost to IT, that is exactly what it is. It's a shift, and it is a significant efficiency measure for our teams across the state to make sure that we have all the data we need to make those decisions. And I talked about the One Nevada plan before. When we're weighing those 6 goals, we need to have the information ready at hand. And this GIS system of engagement will really help us do that, and will save hours upon hours of research on every individual project. So it's a shift in how we spend our resources, but it ultimately will provide a much more efficient project delivery.
Yeah, I appreciate that because that truly is. I mean, we're seeing that throughout the state in all the IT things. Is that these costs are shifting as we do more and more IT. It shifts and provides more efficiencies in other areas where we can hopefully save money on that end. And then as we do that, and that we could be more responsive. So I appreciate that. That's all the questions I have on that. Any questions on the IT from anybody? Okay. Then we're going to move on to the next one. This next item, I don't think you covered this, but we have a question about it. It has to do with the State Infrastructure Bank. And I believe that Assemblywoman Danielle Monroe Moreno is going to ask some questions on that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning. I know you didn't cover it, but the governor has recommended the funding and the launch of the Nevada State Infrastructure Bank. Could you just tell us what's NDOT's involvement with the creation and the operation of the State Infrastructure Bank?
Thank you, Assemblywoman Christina Swallow, for the record. As you're aware, the State Infrastructure Bank is currently in NRS as to be housed within NDOT upon its capitalization. And so now we're at that point where we're looking at capitalizing it. We have been working closely with the Treasurer's Office as well as the Governor's Office in looking at what the infrastructure bank should be used for and helping them work through the broadening of the options that the infrastructure bank could be used for. So we've been working closely with them on that. And at this time, it is our understanding, and I think it's as it's currently written, that while it will be housed within NDOT, it will be governed by its own board of directors. And so we are anticipating if we get to the point of capitalizing it, that we will the governor will work and stand up the board of the directors. We will work collectively with the other agencies as appropriate to identify an executive director to help facilitate the work of the infrastructure bank.
Thank you for that. So would there need to be revisions to your budget to allow for the operation of the state bank?
So as I understand it, and we have been also working with the governor's finance, we have not identified at this time specific budget items. However, we will continue to work with the governor's finance office as well as state treasurer's office to identify anticipated needs, including possibly, if it stood up, not possibly, it'll be needed if it is stood up, a new unclassified position to serve as the bank's executive director. So at a minimum, we would need the funding for and the creation of that executive director position. There may be other needs, and those needs may be able to come out of the capitalization of it. Not exactly sure, but we'll be continuing to work with the governor's finance office and treasurer's office on that as the bill progresses.
Okay, thank you for that. And my last question, so how does NDOT plan to implement the bank while ensuring that the highway funds are not used to support projects and the costs that aren't related to highway construction?
Thank you for the question, Christina Swallow. I'm looking at my notes and I'm like, I forgot this one part, and it was exactly that. We would be asking to create a separate account specifically for the state infrastructure bank. That would ensure that any revenue, any funding that went for the infrastructure bank was protected and maintained in that separate account. We have a lot of experience in maintaining separate accounts via the state infrastructure, the state highway fund, the federal highway fund, and all of the different accounts in the federal allocations, but this would need to be an entirely separate to make sure that it's kept clear on our books, but also to make sure that we meet all accounting practices.
Thank you. Sounds like you guys put a lot of thought into this, so I appreciate the answers to the questions. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. So just so I'm clear, with the infrastructure bank, you would have to get currently you have I'm sure human resource or accounting people or others that are paid from the highway fund. So you would have to have separate people to do all of that. Is that what you anticipate?
Yes, we would, and we would. I need to identify that full structure. Initially, it would be an executive director. It may come with a couple of other team members, or that executive director may identify a full team once they're hired but we would be working closely and managing and working with them. If we used I'm getting text. If we use any NDOT funding, it could be via a cost allocation to help in the initial stages of the establishment for some of that HR support. But ultimately, the fund, the State Infrastructure Bank, is anticipated to be self-sufficient. And again, as that bill progresses, we will continue to work with you to identify all of the costs that might be needed in this first biennium, and then continue to work moving forward as that evolves.
Great. Thank you very much. Any other questions on that item? Not seeing any. Okay, then the next item we had questions on has to do with your fueling system upgrade, and Assemblyman Watts has questions there.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the presentation, Director Swallow. I just have a quick question on this, on E227. From what I saw, the fueling system upgrade project cost a little bit more than it was originally projected at first. Could you explain some of the factors that contributed to that?
I am going to refer to Natalie Lee, our Chief of Financial Management. She has a better understanding of the fueling system evolution.
Thank you.
Natalie?
Good morning. Hold on just a second. Hi, this is Natalie Lieb. Can you see me? Yeah. We had initially the 53 fueling sites, out of which 46 were going to be needing to be upgraded. What really caused a lot of this is the soil, the contaminations. When they went in, they decided that there were 2 fueling tanks in there instead of 1. And so once you got into construction, the time frames and everything that was needing to be done got delayed, and then the prices were going up.
Okay. Thank you for that. So based on that, can you just confirm that based on where you see that project at now, that the funding provided in this budget will allow DOT to complete the entire project?
Yeah, for the record, this is Natalie Lieb. Yes, right now, as it stands, after most of the design has been looked at, as of today, the budget is correct for finishing this project.
Thank you for that. Thank you for the questions, Mr. Chair.
Okay, actually, I want to follow up on that because one of the things that whenever I hear of fuel and fuel tanks, and I always think of contaminated soil and all that. Is there and my understanding is you have some tanks that you're finding that you didn't even know you had. And so how does that play into the costs associated with this upgrade?
For the record, Natalie Lieb, right now we're going in with what we think is going to be going on and how the construction is going to happen. And when you get in there, you just don't know. And so as it stands, the prices have been going up once we have found the additional tanks or the more contaminated soil, and we have to haul it off farther to Utah the last time. So, as it stands, we're hoping that the budget stays, but you just don't know until you get it.
So, but if you run into those kind of environmental issues, those are expensive, aren't they, to remediate?
Yes, they are. Yes, they are. And we say we don't know until we are in there. We follow all the environmental laws, though, and so it may take additional time and additional money once we get in there.
Okay, great. All right, thank you. Any other questions from folks on the fuel upgrades? Okay, I'm not seeing any. All right. Any other questions on any of their budgets before we move on to the next budget? Okay, not seeing any. All right, well, thank you very much. I think that's all we have for all your budgets. Thank you for your presentation, and hope we can get all this work done and not run into issues, which we always do. But thank you very much.
And thank you. If you have any further questions, we are happy to answer any of them. And I know there were a couple things we owe you some additional information on, so we'll get those to you. as soon as we can. Thank you.
All right, thank you. So, okay, thank you very much. We're now going to go on to the Office of Veteran Services, and I believe we have Director Miller that's going to start us off there.
Good morning, Chair Dennis. Can you see and hear me?
Yes, we can hear you and see you. Thank you.
Wonderful. I'm going to share my screen, so bear with me for a minute. All right, and may I ask, can you see my screen, sir?
Yes, I believe, yep, we can see your screen.
Wonderful, thank you. And again, thank you, Chair Dennis and members of the committee for the opportunity to present our proposal for the biennium budget for the Nevada Department of Veteran Services. My name is Cap Miller and I serve as the director. And with me today are Deputy Directors Amy Garland and Fred Wagger, our Executive Officer, Mr. Kurt Green, and our IT Manager, Mr. John Lusak. Go ahead and turn my slide. I know many of you have already seen our mission and vision, but I wanted to share that with you today. And our mission is to ensure that all Nevada veterans and their families understand and can connect to benefits and services they have earned. I did want to take a minute to lay out some of the major issues facing us in the upcoming biennium. First, the decreased census associated with the pandemic at both of our veterans' homes did result in a decreased federal per diem revenue. Our healthy 2561 Southern Nevada State Veterans Home budget depends on a census of about 160 to 165 residents. And we currently have a census of 123, although we have had 5 new admissions in the last several weeks, and we do have a wait list. So we're seeing that number go up. New infection control protocols are driving new equipment, facility, and staffing requirements, and water costs have increased both north and south, raising cemetery irrigation costs. We have seen an increase in our virtual claims for veterans putting in for federal claims and in our veterans home family connection requirements. And both of these have driven increased IT equipment and license needs. We have an aging telephone system, both at our headquarters and at our cemeteries, and that's negatively impacting our ability to respond to our customers. Our cemetery buildings need repair, as does our cemetery equipment and irrigation systems. And finally, the Southern Nevada State Veterans Home is 20 years old, and its design has not kept up with healthcare design ideals that were first published in the 2006 Small House Model Design Guide and later updated in 2019. New design requirements strike a balance between overall cost and operational efficiency while maintaining focus on resident-centered model of care. And additionally, much of the Southern Nevada State Veterans Home existing equipment is past its useful life. The funds to operate our programs come from many sources. However, the primary revenue source for our department are direct federal funds received from operations at our veterans homes and our cemeteries, as shown in the blue and red slices in the larger pie diagram on this chart. Now for the overview of our budget accounts. We have 3 executive budget accounts, 2560, which includes headquarters staff, our service officer program, cemetery and outreach programs, 2561, which supports the Southern Nevada State Veterans Home, and 2569 supporting the Northern Nevada State Veterans Home. Our total FTE is 251.49, and this includes 9 members of the Veterans Service Commission who are not paid a salary. The general fund request over this biennium for our department is $6,544,412. I'll start with budget account 2560. We have 4 enhancements under 2560, and as a background, budget account 2560 supports 62 FTE, which again includes 9 VSC members, and it accounts for 89% of our general fund expenditures. The first budget enhancement under this account is Decision Unit E710, which replaces 25 computers and associated network hardware that are past their useful life or in disrepair, according to EATS and to the team members using this equipment. Our second budget enhancement under this account is E711. It's a request to replace headquarters and cemetery phone systems. The Reno headquarters phone system is 13 years old, and we've had to reboot it every day for a year. That posed quite a problem during COVID when we first didn't have folks in the office. It really did impact customer service. The cemetery phones systems average 20 years old, and because of repeated failures, often the public cannot get a hold of our cemetery staff or leave a message. The next enhancement under this budget account is E712. It replaces cemetery equipment past its useful life and in disrepair. And while the equipment is not as large as the Department of Transportation, it is very important. We have a 14-year-old 6-passenger club car used to transport families to grave sites. Its useful life is 10 years old. The seats are torn, the roof frame is bent, and it can't fit a windshield, and the front end drags on the ground. We have 2 4-seat club car carryalls. They're 18 years old, useful life 10 years. Their front suspensions are shot, and they need new engines. Next is our sod cutter. It's 18 years old, and it really doesn't cut the sod. And finally, a stand-on aerator. It's 22 years old and past its useful life of 18 years. It's not extracting all the dirt plugs that it cuts. This kind of machinery goes down and pulls out dirt plugs and allows for circulation of the air. And so it's not working either. And the last enhancement under this budget account is enhancement E800. E800 transfers non-general funds from budget account 2561, the Southern Nevada Home, and 2569, the Northern Nevada Veterans Home, into budget account 2560 to fund a portion of the costs of the department headquarters, to include salaries, assessments, and office operating costs. Our base budget already had an allocation from the Southern Nevada budget account. This enhancement unit increases that allocation slightly to cover increases in rental and other operating costs, and adds a new transfer from the Northern Nevada Veterans Home budget account, 2569. You'll see both transfers in more detail when we get to those accounts. Now on to budget account 2561, the Southern Nevada State Veterans Home.
Hold on 1 second before you go on to the next budget. Let me just see if we have any questions. We have no major issues, but I just want to make sure. Except I can't see everybody, so I can't tell.
Do you want me to stop sharing for a minute, sir?
Yes. Yeah, just for a second. Anybody have any questions on this item, on this budget? I don't see any, so go ahead and continue.
Okay. Oh, wow. Here we go. All right. 2561, Southern Nevada State Veterans Home. The team at the home provides 24-hour skilled nursing care in a 180-bed skilled nursing facility for eligible veterans, spouses of veterans, and Gold Star parents. This account supports 185.49 FTE and is funded by federal, private, and other revenue. We had 4 proposed enhancements in this account, but have recently pulled one, as I will discuss later in the briefing. Finally, I want to note that we're updating our revenue projections with the most recent data and working with LCV staff to determine if an amendment or technical adjustment will be needed to ensure we have the budget authority for the remainder of the year. And I'll discuss that a little bit later in the brief. Our first enhancement under this budget account is enhancement E710. It replaces computers, network hardware, a video teleconferencing system at the Southern Nevada Home. The computers range from 6 to 10 years old. They're not running well and are recommended for replacement by EATS. The network hardware is starting to fail and uses outdated technology. And then additionally, our video teleconferencing system has poor audio and video quality and does not support viewing multiple locations at the same time. The next enhancement under this account is E730. It replaces worn and unsightly flooring at the Southern Nevada home. The first picture shows the peeling of the rubber flooring. The second picture shows gouges in the marmoleum flooring. And in the third picture, you can see carpet wear. Enhancement E731 was intended to replace 2 chillers at the Southern Nevada State Veterans Home. They are 20 years old and at the end of their useful service life. One chiller failed last year, and we are renting a chiller for over $15,000 a month. In addition, the chillers contain R22 refrigerant, which is no longer manufactured in the United States, making it scarce and expensive. During the January 27th, 2021 Interim Finance Committee meeting, NDVS requested and received approval to fund this enhancement with Southern Nevada State Veterans Home reserves. If we had waited for CIP project approval, we would have incurred additional rental costs of $684K before a possible installation associated with the 2021 CIP. On approval to use the reserves for this project, we pulled the chiller enhancement from our budget proposal. The final enhancement under budget account 2561 is enhancement E800. E800 is the transfer of non-general funds to budget account 2560 as discussed earlier. This enhancement increases the Southern Nevada State Veterans Home allocation slightly to cover rental and other operating and costs increases associated with those headquarters staff members who support the operation of the Southern Nevada State Veterans Home. And Mr. Chair, this concludes budget account 2561. Did you want to open for questions before I go to the next budget account?
Yeah, I know that Senator Brooks has a question.
Thank you, Chair Dennis. My question is about the chiller replacement, and you know, you really did a great job at IFC explaining to us, you know, what problems were and what the need was. What's the status of that project? Where are we at with that on as far as like construction and procurement and things like that?
This is Kat Miller for the record. It has not been completed yet. I'd like to take that over to Deputy Director Amy Garland, who's on the line for a current status on that. Amy, could you answer that?
Yes. For the record, my name is Amy Garland. I'm the Deputy Director of Healthcare Services, Department of Veteran Services. Through you, Chair Dennis, to Senator Brooks. We are currently in the bidding process for those chillers with State Public Works. So construction hasn't been completed, but I know contracts and State Public Works are working on moving it forward. But I will also get a more firm answer from them and get back to you, Senator Brooks.
Thank you. So do you have an anticipated timeline associated with that? I mean, did they, like, they have a RFP process open? You know when it's supposed to close or when the construction is supposed to take place?
I will find that out for you, sir. I don't want to guess for you. I do have some semblance, but let me get a firm answer and I'll get back to you today on that.
And Senator Brooks, Kat Miller for the record. When I spoke to Mr. Ward Patrick, he said they were making that a priority. But again, we'll get the specific dates and get that to you today as far as what they anticipate the timeline to be.
Great, thank you. And so you don't have a rented chiller right now, right? You don't have a need for any chill air conditioning at the facility, right?
Kat Miller for the record. Sir, no, we don't. And that's because of the current weather. It doesn't require having that chiller because of the temperatures. So we're hoping to get that new chiller in before it becomes essential and we have to rent again.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions on this budget? I don't think we have any other questions. I appreciate the picture as you showed us your equipment, your computer equipment that had the little sticker on there that said, "Don't turn this off," or "Don't run this without, being plugged in," which tells me that your batteries are dead because it's so old. So anyways, thank you. Okay, let's go on to the next budget.
Yes, sir. I know my IT folks will appreciate that you picked up on the nuance of that. Mr. Chair, members of the committee, the next budget account is budget account 2569, Northern Nevada State Veterans Home. The home provides 24-hour skilled nursing care in a 96-bed state veterans home. This account supports 4 FTE and is funded by general fund and federal revenue. We have one enhancement for this account. The enhancement for this account is enhancement E800, and this requests a new transfer to budget account 2560 to pay for a portion of the operation of the headquarters office. As mentioned earlier, the Southern Nevada State Veterans Home already transfers funds to support headquarters office. So this this request will provide consistency and reduce the need for general fund in budget account 2560. And before I leave the presentation on Veterans Home, I did want to provide an update on anticipated funding we may receive as a result of 2 federal laws. Public Law 116-260, the Consolidated Appropriations Act of 2021, was signed December 27th, 2020. This act appropriated $100 million for the prevention, preparation, and response to coronavirus in state veterans' homes. We estimate, based on information we received from the VA, we will receive somewhere between $5,000 and $6,000 for each of 194 veterans who were residing in our homes on 24 December 2020. If we do receive the low end, $5,000, that would equal $970,000. Now, again, we have not received formal verification of the amount of funding yet, although under the new law, it is clear that we will receive a portion of this funding. And as soon as we find out what we're going to receive, we will forward that on to the Governor's Finance Office and LCB. We have already been asked to submit the total number, the 194, to the VA so they can figure out how they're going to split that money up among all the veterans' homes. Once we receive the funds, I hope to use them to restore our reserves and perhaps to support a state match needed for our VA grant that we have in to modify the Southern Nevada State Veterans Home to ensure we are better postured for future outbreaks. The remodel of the home that we have a grant in for would move it from double rooms to single rooms, create a better HVAC system, and other things that better posture us for an outbreak and provide a better quality of life for the veterans living in the home. The second law was Public Law 117-2, the American Rescue Plan Act of 2021, which was signed March 11th of this year. Like the December law, the American Rescue Plan Act gives funds for a one-time expenditure to state veterans' home in proportion to each state's share of the total resident capacity in these veterans' homes. We're assuming that will mean the total number of veterans that were in the homes on March 11th, but we have not yet received information or guidance or been asked for the total numbers. The amount in this law was $250 million. Now remember, the preceding law was $100 million. This is $250 million. So it'll be more than double the amount per resident. So there's a potential for, up to $2 million more that we could receive. Again, we have received no guidance yet or no information. All we know is under this law, we will get a portion of the 250 million. And again, we will make sure to keep the Governor's Office of Finance and the LCB informed as we get more information on these two laws. There is a second part to Public Law 117-2, the American Rescue Plan Act of 2021. Under this law, the VA's state home construction grant received $500 million. Normally, the VA receives between 90 million to 250 million, depending on the year under the grant program. This is an additional 500 million that would provide grants for furnishing nursing home care to veterans to expand, remodel, or alter existing buildings for nursing homes, adult day health, or hospital care for veterans in state homes. NDVS, as I mentioned, currently has an active grant application for remodeling the Southern Nevada State Veterans Home and a design project in our CIP for this CIP. While the VA has not yet released plans for the awards of these funds, for the award of these funds under a grant, this new money will improve our chances of getting a renovation grant. And Mr. Chair and members of the committee, this concludes not only this budget account 2569, but our briefing. And I stand ready for any questions you might have.
Thank you very much. Assemblywoman Miller has a question.
Thank you, Senator, and thank you, Director Miller. My question is because I guess I've been aware of this but never fully understood it. So it's my understanding that our Southern Nevada Veterans Home is operated by the state, but that the Northern Nevada Veterans Home is actually privatized through a vendor. So could you explain why that is?
Yes, ma'am. Kat Miller for the record. When we went to the legislature to stand up the Northern Nevada Home and receive the state match, I did an analysis of how long it would take to become general fund independent with a state system versus a contracted system. It took us over 10 years to become general fund independent for the Southern Nevada Home. Now, there were many reasons for that, but part of the reason was the state system was not as flexible in bringing on staff and getting them stood up in time. And at that point, the desire was to become general fund independent, from the administration as soon as possible. And there were a lot of discussions around this. We would have been general fund independent by now at the Northern Nevada Home had coronavirus not hit. We are looking at maybe July or August being general fund independent at the Northern Nevada Home. And I've got my fingers crossed. Oh, I'm sorry. Amy, correct me. Is that 2022 or 2021 for general fund independence? If I can go to Deputy Director Garland.
Yes, please.
That is 2022, Kat.
Sorry, 2022. So July of 2022. And honestly, with these funds, if they're coming in for the American Rescue Plan Act and the other one, I think that will be sooner. And so that was the desire to become general fund independent. And then to go to a future legislature, because now we've got two different systems, a state system and a contracted system.
Mm-hmm.
And at some point, we're going to have to do that analysis and figure out what works best for the state. We knew that we weren't going to be able to come to this legislature and make a recommendation because we hadn't had the systems in place long enough to do any type of decent analysis. But I'm anticipating next legislative session, and that's what I said last session too, in 4 years, and it's still on track. 2 years from now, I think there's going to have to be a really, deliberate and detailed discussion about how we want to run these homes, whether it be state or contracted. But I still believe firmly it was the right decision to make at the time because we can get general fund independence, not be reliant on the general fund, and then we'll be in a position to make that call and have more time if the decision is to go to a state system to bring on state workers in a more deliberate fashion. Did that answer your question, Assemblywoman?
It did, and it does. I would encourage you to continue to strive for a state-operated home, and if you can do that before 2022, that would even be more fantastic. And I think you just alluded to my next question, which was about the 9 employees. So if it's through a contracted vendor, then those 9 employees working there are not state employees. Is that correct?
Kat Miller for the record, ma'am, there's 4 employees at the Northern Nevada State
4.
Veterans Home. By the VA, if you have a grant home and you accept per diem, you have to have 1 full-time state employee. So that's one of them. What I asked to bring on during the last session was a full-time facility manager and an IT person, because I wanted that continuity as we built it to make sure we knew where we could do the punch list and we knew where all the IT was, and we had that historical knowledge in our state employee, and it didn't go away if a contractor went away. And the other one was an administrative position that helped the state home officer and the deputy. So those are the 4 positions. And I anticipate those would stay regardless of what decision the governor and the legislature makes in the direction they want to go next session.
Okay, but currently they're not receiving like PERS and all of the same benefits as other state employees.
Oh, they are. Kat Miller for the record. The 4 state employees are 4 state employees. They're
right, but how many are not state employees?
Kat Miller for the record. I'd have to get you a current number of staff. It's around 125 that are contracted under the contract management company. That varies because if they have less residents, they wouldn't necessarily have to bring on as many staff, but it does vary. And I do want to say for the record, we do have contracted staff at the Southern Nevada home, our dietary, our physical therapy, our medical director. So there are housekeeping. So there are some contracted services at the Southern Nevada home, just not the clinical staff. The clinical staff is state employees in the Southern Nevada home, clinical and administrative staff, and they're contracted at the Northern Nevada home. And I'll be honest, to me, state employees, contracted employees, that is a state decision. That is the governor's decision. That is the legislator's decision to make. I will do my darndest to make sure you have all the information you need to decide what is the best way to go when the next session comes up.
Thank you for that, Director. Thank you. And thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Any other questions on this budget, or actually any of the other ones for that matter, before I close the budget, before we go on? I am not seeing any hands. Okay. Want to thank you very much, Director, for your budget. And I think that we're done with that one. So we will go on to the next item on our agenda, which is public comment. And I'm going to ask BPS to open the public comment line and queue up the first caller.
Thank you so much, Chair. The public line is open and working, and there are no callers at this time.
Okay, I think we need to give it at least 30 seconds because they haven't even heard it yet. So
Certainly. Thank you, Chair. BPS will stand by for you.
Thank you. Probably not. So I'm assuming nobody's on still.
That is correct, sir. I'm sorry. The public line is open and working, and there are no callers at this time.
Great. Okay. Thank you very much. All right. That's all the items that we have for our budget today. Want to thank everybody. Great questions, great discussion, great presentations. With that, we will go ahead and adjourn. The meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.